Welcome to another edition of Niger Innis Presents The Trump Revolution, a part of the TV Abraham Network. Well, we got a real treat today. We've got a European elections analyst for the National Center for Public Policy Research. Richard Holt is a longtime veteran in politics. I'm a bit longer in the tooth than you are, Richard, but you've been in this game for 2 decades plus and have managed local, state, and national campaigns. And you currently serve, even though your depth of knowledge expands across the pond
Right.
to the old world, that being Europe. You still keep roots here at home because you are the political director of the Alabama Republican Party. And you're a veteran and a proud father of two, the most important attributes for you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Well, Richard, thank you for joining us today. I actually want to take advantage of your expertise in Europe. And one of the issues I'd like to discuss is a Politico, if you will,
Hmm.
the journal, had an article recently, I think within the last few days, about how the EU czar, energy czar, speaking on behalf of the EU, has said they are going to distance themselves from dependency or reliance on American energy, in particular natural gas, which is a strong pivot considering that I think the most significant effort made in the energy sector internationally was the fact that Europe finally uh, reduced its dependence on Russian oil while Russia
Right.
is engaged in a takeover of Ukraine and
Mhm.
moved dramatically to the United States to the tune of 5 times what they
Mhm.
were of just a few years ago. Only 5% of Europe's natural gas came from the United States. Today, it's 25%, which is
Right.
a real significant change. But we see these seeds are being planted for for the Europeans to move away from U.S. dependence. And of course, this is a lot of this has to do with the stance that the president and the United States is making regarding Greenland. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, for sure. One of the big problems that the Europeans have is that their whole ecological agenda is failing. They fell in line with the globalist idea that if they don't turn to green energy and deprive people of their possessions, that civilization itself would suffer.
Well,
And right
Rich,
now,
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to emphasize the brilliance of your point here. I think our world was supposed to have ended at least 5 times over the
oh
last
yeah,
30 years.
yeah, absolutely,
And somehow
absolutely,
we're you in Alabama and me here in Nevada. I'm still
yeah.
breathing good air.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And everything's fine. But what hasn't been fine is the European economy. If the energy prices in Germany are so high that 75% of German businesses are planning to offshore and leave the country because of
Wow.
energy prices and regulations. And so when the Europeans talk about trying to decouple from the United States, it's a completely ridiculous proposal. I mean, they've already had to decouple from Russia, as you said. They have this green agenda that has caused the cost of energy to inflate at incredible heights. I mean, we're talking about $2,000, $3,000 more per year for energy for the average European as a result of this agenda. The only thing that was probably helping them was our natural gas, and that's one of the best things we can give them because we have so much of it. And now they want to say that they want to turn it away. Well, they're just looking to excuse pushing harder for this failed green agenda to ruin their citizens' lives and control them, and then try to justify it as though they have to decouple from America because sometimes we're mean. And that's
Yeah,
what it comes
yeah.
down to.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Mhm.
Did you say that 75% of businesses are leaving Germany because of the high cost of energy?
Yeah, they've already got plans to offshore or have already begun the process. And that's just Germany. Imagine what the rest of it looks like.
I probably disagree with you a little bit here, but it's not just Germany. Germany, along
Right.
with France, are the
Mhm.
anchors of the European Union, are they not?
Oh, very much so. At least they're very influential, at least. And that's the problem they've got when you have that much business leaving, you've got serious problems.
It's going to have a trickle effect throughout Europe.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, the excuse that the EU czar of energy is giving is what he deems to be a belligerent tone coming from our president regarding
Belligerent.
Greenland. Yeah.
I'm sorry. You know,
Regarding Greenland. So, if
President's
you're
so mean. You know,
exactly.
somebody tell their mommies about that.
And as you know, realpolitik, be it economies or foreign policy,
Mhm.
generally militarily, is not softball. It's fastball, it's hardball. And I agree with you. They're being a bit dramatic on this. But the reason they give, of course, is President Trump talking about the need and the strategic need and interest that we have in either absorbing Greenland or having some de facto um, alliance with Greenland. Can you talk a little bit about that, Rich?
Yeah, the people of Greenland are in a terrible situation. Ever since the 18th century, they have been occupied by this
Hmm.
European power. They have undergone genocide. They've undergone various acts of violence that still exist today. There are still kids that were kidnapped as recently as 15 years ago from their families
And
in that
these
country.
are the Eskimo. I probably have the term wrong, but the native
The
population.
native population, yes. And so this is what's being done to them, and their resources are being exploited. The average Greenland people who live there, right? They have they make about $20 an hour on average, 15, $20 an hour to work on fishing boats owned by companies from Denmark. They don't even own the companies that are taking their resources and can only get menial jobs as secondhand laborers on their own resources. And so they're in a terrible situation. They're completely exploited. This is a group of native peoples who have a terrible history in North America and in this
Sure.
hemisphere. And we're continuing to allow this exploitation to take place. And so although this isn't being framed this way by the administration, I think there's a cause for trying to have some sort of historical justice by doing right by these people.
Well,
And
it seems to me what you're talking about is essentially a liberation, not an invasion of Greenland, but
right.
a liberation of Greenland and Greenlanders.
Absolutely. And the Danish, I mean, they're making so much money. They've got very little around the world. Their huge empire has faltered since the 16th century. And this is the one thing they've got left, but it's in an important geopolitical position for us. The Russians have already been putting themselves all over the Arctic for the last since the end of the Cold War. They have bases, they have resources, they've got icebreaker ships up there. They're moving into the region and they are years ahead of us. And we're to a
And it's
point
impossible
now.
that the platform of Russia is also being used by China as well.
I think they say that. I don't know how true that is. I know that's a good talking point
Yeah.
from the admin, but I do find it hard to believe the Russians are giving the Chinese access to the
So
military facilities.
So China is more of a theoretical threat to be
Hmm.
engaged in that region,
At
and
this
Russia
point.
is
Mhm.
concrete and real, and it's here and now.
Yeah. 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 And that's the difference between the two. And Greenland is in an excellent position to prevent any kind of dominance in the Arctic. And if we do end up with more ability to get through the ice, if the Northwest Passage opens up, that's going to be prime real estate. And prime real estate tends to be a good cause for war.
And it's not something that Donald Trump, the president, is unfamiliar with, real estate.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and Northern Canada and Greenland having it in our possession, I can see the argument for it. Some of the counter arguments do make sense, though. Denmark has made it very clear that we can kind of put whatever we want there,
Yeah,
but
we
they
have
still
open
want
access.
control of those resources. And
Right.
so I'm kind of curious what the admin is thinking as to why it needs to be a U.S. possession, based on that.
I,
But then again, when someone has the power to tell you to leave, you're not really secure.
Right.
And I think that would be the strongest argument, the strongest way to agree with the president on this.
And I think you also stumbled upon the reason as well, which is the vast mineral wealth
Hmm.
that exists.
Yeah.
Right now, that belongs to the Danes. If the U.S. were to work out some type of protectorate status or actually absorb Greenland, those minerals would belong to us, would they not?
Yeah. Yeah, they would. They would, absolutely.
And so that's a big difference as well. You brought up Canada and one of your statements, and one of the alarming things that we're hearing is that while Europe is expressing the desire to move away from the United States, and the umbrella of Western civilization, of which Canada is a very important part. Some European nations, and Canada in particular, has just cut a deal with China. So you have this dual phenomenon that is a little troublesome, and I don't want to be too creative with my analysis here, but you have this dual phenomenon, at least a perception of a dual phenomenon of Europe moving more and more away from the United States. And Europe and Canada moving closer to China. Prime Minister Starmer of the UK just left China. So is that a troubling sign for the future of foreign relations?
Actually, no. The Europeans and the Canadians are just trying to play China off the US. They just want to make it clear that they do have other options and they don't have to play at our table anymore. But the ability for them to actually make that move would be extreme. But the Europeans do want access to Chinese markets and cheap Chinese products, but they don't want Chinese influence. And that's the downside. That's the other side of the coin when you're dealing with China. You can't get their markets or market access without some kind of control. If you remember a while back, they canceled an NBA player's visa, I think,
Yeah.
because there was an ownership issue. I don't follow sports, but I do remember that he had exercised American rights on American soil, criticized the Chinese government, and now he's cut off from Chinese markets. So they don't have our concept or ideas of freedom at all, and will do their best to try to control these nations through their markets and in denial of access. And you saw that there was a small country in Europe, I think I don't remember which one, that had recognized Taiwan, and then they were cut off.
Wow.
That was it, and it was problematic. And so China weaponizes its markets in ways that we're not used to because we typically believe in free trade here, and that's been our focus.
Rich, when people talk about Europe, you talk about it as if it's one entity, and it really isn't, right? I mean, you have
Right. No,
people
no.
like the Hungarians that are part of the EU. Giorgia Meloni's Italy is very much a part of the EU. Even the UK, with a Labour Party in power, seem to get along better with the United States. And actually, even Germany, now that it's changed its head of state, they seem to get along a lot better with the Trump administration than is typical of, say, a France and some of the other European nations. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, with the conservative parties making major victories in the last year in their parliamentary elections, both locally and within the EU Parliament, we're seeing a tilt to the right politically. And I think that made the big case. Eastern Europe's kind of with us. They lived through socialism, they lived through the Soviet Union, and they're deeply concerned about the rising EU Soviet style governance that is creeping in. And I think that has them more in line with conservative values and closer ties with Trump style approach. And so you still have France, who's a hanger-on, as well as the Liberal Party in Britain. Even though he's reaching out, he's trying to stay in touch because they know they need us and they want to be our friends. But there's still going to be some pullback within domestically in those two countries. But the most of the European nations are more with us than I think people would care to admit. And Hungary is blatantly with us. Serbia is moving towards us. The Romanians finally got their conservative governance in place. We've got
Poland,
elections will be
Poland is
happening.
probably with us.
Poland, totally with us. Both their political parties are center-right political parties, so they're with us for the most part. And so they tend to lean in the conservative direction, and they tend to want to have the same freedoms and rights that we have here in open markets and so forth. But the EU has become a stranglehold on them, and it's slowly tightening its hands around their necks, and they're starting to see that.
Want to see the definition of big bureaucratic government? Look at the EU and how it deals with
Yeah,
its member nations.
yeah.
Rich, in the few minutes we have left with you, I want to pivot a little bit to the Middle East because, of course, the Middle East is in a strategic,
Mhm.
geostrategic location, but things that happen
Right.
in the Middle East tend to have a reverberation around the world. Um, what do European? I think President Trump has done a brilliant job. In fact, he seems to be the only president that can do the kinds of things that he's doing, not just with the Arabs and with the Palestinians, but with the Israelis as well. I think he's played his cards thus far brilliantly. What are the folks saying across the pond in Europe about the United States role?
You get mixed results. One thing that I found is common is there's this idea that America is constantly invading the Middle East and causing war there. And America very much got the blame for everything that Israel was doing. And that was seen with the hostility. They really had a view that the Crusades at some point need to stop. They've grown tired of them. We've continued them. They've been going on since Alexander fought Xerxes. And at some point, we got to slow it down. And so there was very, I think what we've seen more recently has been some hostility, but I think there's definitely an appreciation for America being the bulwark and standing for freedom. So I get mixed things when I talk to my European friends, and I think you go to any college campus, you'll get another version of
Oh
of
God.
the argument,
God, God forbid.
you know,
Unless it's the University of Alabama, which I think it probably
yeah.
tends to be a bit more reasonable and common sense
Mhm.
conservative than, say, Harvard or Brown
Yeah.
University.
But what I've gotten from Europeans is just a genuine frustration
Right.
about America's constant, and it's not necessarily even what's happened more recently. It's that we're pulling them in with us. And at some point they're kind of tired of going off with Americans, which they love. We had a lot of street cred with them throughout the Cold War. They were with us. I mean we had so much street cred that it lasted until, now.
Yeah.
So with all these wars, I mean, that says a lot about the good that we've done to the world and how much they love us and see us as their brothers in arms. But they are tired of following us around the world.
Right. Well, I think the difference between this president and other presidents regarding that region is that this president, for all his bluster, actually
Mhm.
his actions have been larger than his words. Whereas other presidents,
Right.
we've been talking about having a recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. I think going back to
Hmm.
Clinton, where presidents were saying they openly support Jerusalem being the eternal capital of Israel. And Trump didn't talk about it like these other presidents did. He just did it and got it done.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and there are other things as well. The peace deal that he's got on the plate with Gaza and Israel. I think only a President Trump could do that. But
I think that's one of
yeah,
the hallmarks of President Trump is he didn't let a bunch of advisors and guys in suits come into his office and tell him what to do. He says, "We're going to do it, and damn it, now." And that of anything to be happy about from the Trump administration, even if you don't like everything that he did, you have to appreciate the fact that he was actually the president, not the military industrial complex, not the big banks. Trump was president, and that might be something we never see
yeah,
again.
yeah, that's an excellent point, Rich. I think he is a once in a few generational presidents. And when history looks back on his presidencies, the first in 2017 to 2021 and the second 2025 to 2028, they're going to look quite fondly under the kinds of things that he's done. Not so much the tweets, not so much the
Mhm.
bluster, and the threats and all that stuff, but
Right.
the actual accomplishments and what he's gotten done.
Mhm.
Any last words about the future of European and U.S. relations that you have, Rich, as we close up this segment?
Yeah, we just need to do more. to be friends with the Europeans. And something that a project that's really important to me is doing our best to connect with other political parties over there, for example. I spent time at the International Democratic Union recently, got to know our brothers in arms who are fighting in the conservative movement over in Europe, and they really want our help, they want our support, they want our unity. And even on that level, there are ways that we can help the global right to win elections. We don't just have to wait for a wild guy in Argentina to step up and become the greatest libertarian candidate ever. We can reach back across there and help them meet policymakers, meet campaign people before they get elected, and then we help form those relationships, help these conservative parties to do something, and that's a project that's a passion of mine,
Well,
and
it
and
would
we need more
certainly
support for it.
it would certainly be a lot easier for this center to right administration that we have
Yeah.
here in the United States. And interestingly enough, though, strange alliances occur across party lines or across ideological lines. I remember in the first Trump administration, you had a left wing populist in Mexico, but it was
Mhm.
that left wing populist in Mexico that worked with President Trump to establish the phenomenal Remain in Mexico policy, which dramatically cut down illegal immigration to
Right.
the United States. So even those lefties over there, sometimes you get a couple of lefties with sanity over in
Yeah.
Europe and Latin America.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. Well, Richard, folk who want to follow you, your thoughts, you've got a big intellect on these issues. How can they find you and find your writings and your points of view?
Yeah, I'm on Substack. It's therichardsholt.substack.com. And you can then the Richard S. Holt are most of my socials. So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and so forth there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Rich, it's been a pleasure having you on. We're going to have you on again. You're a great guest, and your knowledge is vast. All the best, my friend.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
Okay, take care.